Hello Internet, so nice to see you. Today I'm gonna answer all your music theory questions.
Thanks for your videos. I have a question for you. Once you mentioned you were about to read your 30th book on harmony and music theory. Could you suggest some books to start with?
There is no good book to start with because all the books of music theory existing are assuming that you have a teacher to guide you. Those are not standalone books. They are reference books if you are enrolled in a course at the university, for instance, or with a teacher. I honestly don't feel like recommending any specific kind of book because they are all this kind of, they already start with assuming you know something or somebody can clarify those things for you. If you want to start somewhere though, I do have a free ebook on starting music theory. You can find it on the link on the top right of this video, and completely free. Go there, read it. Once you finish reading it, I have other free ebooks to move forward from that.
Okay, so how did you arrive at half diminished from that G7? And do you have a formula or a chart for this? Please.
So that's a question from a negative harmony video. And again, in negative harmony, the whole idea is that we exchange notes in a very specific way. We write notes down in the circle of fifths. C, G, D, A, E, B, and behind here F, B flat, E flat, A flat, B flat, and G flat, which is opposite C. And then we find, let's say we are in C major, we find the first of the key and the fifth of the key, and we drive a line between the two of them. Now all the notes are paired this way. Negative harmony is simply exchanging the notes this way. So wherever I had a C in the original song, now I put a G. Wherever I had a G, now I put a C. Wherever D, I put an F. Wherever I put a D, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the chord we're trying to reflect right now is the G7th chord. The G7th chord is made by the notes G, B, D, and F. So what we do with negative harmony, we change all those notes according to this. So G becomes C, B becomes A flat, D becomes F, F becomes D. And now you take those notes and you try to make sense of those notes. And typically, if you read this chord in this direction, you want to read this chord in this other direction, it's easier. So if you take D, F, A flat, C, this is a D minor 7th, flat 5 chord. Okay? Or depending on the context, at the half diminished chord. But they have the same notes. So, okay? So that's how I got from the G7 to this chord in negative harmony. Like I do with every other chord in negative harmony, you change everything note by note according to this idea. If you guys want to know more about this, I have a whole playlist on negative harmony, which I'm going to link in the description below.
Why choose these chords to flesh out a Dorian flat 2? Is that in the manual?
No, the point of choosing chords from a scale is not because it's written in the manual or not. The point is to make clear what scale you are using. So in this case, you have the Dorian flat 2 scale. It's an easy scale actually, despite the complex name. The notes are A, B flat, C, D, E, F sharp, G, and yes, I can put a sharp and a flat in the same scale. There is no prohibition against that because this is not a major or a minor scale, or not a natural major or natural minor scale. So I can have both sharps and flat in this scale, no problem. What makes this scale special is the presence of the flat second, so the B flat, and the presence of the natural sixth, so the F sharp, at the same time. Because if I had only the natural sixth, so if I had A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, this would be just a Dorian scale. If instead I had only the flat second but not the natural sixth, this would be a Phrygian scale. Okay, so this scale is a hybrid of a Phrygian scale and a Dorian scale. If I don't play both those notes somewhere in the piece of music, then your ear cannot possibly understand that this is a Dorian flat second. You have to play this note and this note in the piece of music. Otherwise, it doesn't sound that way. It doesn't sound like a Dorian flat 2. It's normal. I mean, your ear cannot know that I choose this scale unless I actually play those notes, because your ear does not know what I have in mind and what scale I was thinking about. So all the chords I picked in the video of the Dorian flat second contain either both those notes, or I picked two chords, one containing the B flat and one containing the F sharp. But to make this sound like a Dorian flat second, you need to have both those notes. Now this happens to all scales, okay? Your ear default to major and minor scales. To make any of the modes, for instance, sound, you need to find what notes are different from the major or the minor scale and make sure you play those notes somewhere in your piece of music. Otherwise, your ear will just understand what you're playing as being in the major or the minor scale.
Hey man, I wanted to ask, where do scales that share ethnic names accurately derive from? Does that mean that most modes have ethnic origins, we just can't find out where they originated? Like, I had to do an extensive search to discover harmonic minors really named the Nahawand Iranian mode, compared to Phrygian dominant, which is usually referred to as the Jewish, Hebrew, Phrygish, Israeli mode very commonly.
Just because a scale that we use in the Western canon has a name in another tradition does not mean that the other tradition arrived first or that we arrived first. Once you start studying music theory and you understand how those notes come together, you discover that even if you start only knowing major and minor scale, or even if you start knowing only pentatonic scale, by a series of successive kind of obvious reasoning, again, once you understand how those notes are put together, you can arrive to a number of other scales who have already been invented. Scales like harmonic minor or Phrygian dominant or a melodic minor or all the kind of exotic scale like Hungarian minor, they're quite natural in a sense. There are possible combinations that sound good. I'm not surprised if those scales have been rediscovered independently in different traditions. Doesn't mean that one tradition arrived first and then everybody else copied from there. And indeed, those scales are used in a completely different way in all those traditions. We in the Western canon tend to take chords from those scales. Other traditions tend to play, for instance, the root note as a drone and then play the rest of the scale on top. For instance, that's one possible way, not true for all traditions. So it's not that since a scale has 12 different names in 12 different traditions or countries, those are the real names. We simply have different names for the same thing in different traditions. If anything, this means that there is something in common in the way we hear music, because we keep gravitating around the same scales even in different traditions.